history when we return.
Some say that spirits walk the earth because of violent deaths or uncompleted missions. Over 100 years ago, in the midst of the most terrible bloodshed, lived the most haunted president in American history. His soul may still linger in a house we all know.
There's a legend in the White House that Abraham Lincoln's ghost still wanders, that the Lincoln bedroom is haunted. His room is now a guest room, but visitors like Winston Churchill have felt his presence so strongly they have refused to stay there. Presidents Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower wrote of feeling Lincoln's presence. Theodore Roosevelt felt it too. I think of Abraham Lincoln with his sad, strong, deeply furrowed face all the time, he wrote. I see him in the different rooms and in the halls. Why would Lincoln's soul not rest? Every man who has lived here has been haunted by the grave responsibility he has undertaken and the decisions he must make. But for no man was this more true than Abraham Lincoln. Within weeks of his becoming president, the Civil War began.
He didn't call it a war. He called it a rebellion or an insurrection. And he felt that that was his guiding, impelling, grinding, driving purpose. Restore the Union. No matter what else might be done, he had to restore the Union.
Restoring the Union meant more Americans were to lose their lives in this war than in all other American conflicts combined, before or since.
Was Lincoln a haunted man? I think you have to take into account the fact that he knew he had initiated the Civil War. And I think you can't escape the fact that the 623,000 men who died in the Civil War, all 623,000 of them, one by one, marched across the carpet in front of Abraham Lincoln, and he knew they were there, though he didn't know their names, and he didn't know whether they were wearing blue or gray. They marched in front of him, and Lincoln knew that those 623,000 men owed their deaths to his decision to save the Union.
But if these tragedies were public, there were personal ones as well. In February 1862, Lincoln's beloved son Willie died of typhoid fever after weeks of suffering.
Willie was the shining hope of the family because everyone said he was like his father. His speech patterns, his looks, his gait even, was very much like his father. Their hope was in Willie. And when Willie was gone, the family were absolutely crushed.
In the days that followed, Lincoln returned to the cemetery where the boy was buried. Twice he asked for Willie's coffin to be opened so he could gaze upon his son.
Do you ever find yourself talking with the dead? I do. Ever since Willie's death, I catch myself involuntarily talking to him, as if he were near me, and I feel that he is.
Remember that we were engaged in the Great War, and all over this country, north and south, families were grieving over having lost loved ones, didn't even know where they died in many instances, and were trying to contact them if possible through the medium of spirits. It was a national hysteria, and the Lincoln family was influenced to some extent by that. Seance was perfectly respectable in Lincoln's day.
Mary Todd, Lincoln's wife, arranged for seances in the White House. The president attended several himself as they tried to contact Willie.
We would like to hope that the father's heart might have been gladdened a little bit by, and the mother's heart, by contacting the spirit of this dead youngster. There's no evidence that they ever found that kind of consolation.
It was in November 1863, at Gettysburg, that Lincoln tried to offer consolation to the entire nation. The battle there had been the turning point of the war, at a cost of over 50,000 dead and wounded on both sides. In his greatest speech, Lincoln paid tribute to them, affirming that the ideals for which they had died were alive and vital, that the principle that all men are created free and equal would not perish from the earth. Lincoln's own life had been in danger throughout his presidency. With the war nearly won, He worried that he might not live long enough to build the peace. Just days before his assassination, he had a terrifying dream. These are Lincoln's own words.
I retired very late. I'd been waiting for important dispatches from the front. I could not have been long in bed when I fell into a slumber, for I was weary. I soon began to dream. There seemed to be a death-like stillness about me, and then I heard subdued sobs, as if a number of people were weeping. I thought I left my bed and wandered downstairs. I went from room to room. No living person was in sight, but the same mournful sounds of distress met me as I passed along. I kept on until I arrived at the East Room, which I entered, and there I met with a sickening surprise. Before me was a catafalque, on which rested a corpse wrapped in funeral vestments. Around it were stationed soldiers who were acting as guards, and there were a throng of people. "Who is dead in the White House?" I demanded of one of the soldiers. "The president," was his answer. "He was killed by an assassin." Then there came a loud burst of grief from the crowd. I slept no more that night.
Ford's Theater, April 14th, 1865. The South had surrendered just days before. The war had been won. It was on that night John Wilkes Booth killed the president.
Lincoln really wanted to go to the theater. He really wanted to have a chance to laugh. He was feeling good on April 14th. And it's a very funny point in the play that we're at when Booth actually enters the box. He knew that would be the case. He knew the play. He knew that the line that immediately preceded his firing the shot would bring a laugh from the house. He knew that nobody would be expecting or prepared for what he was about to do. At a moment of levity, a moment of lightness, maybe the most tragic moment in American history would take place.
He was ready to reconstruct. The war was over. The South was defeated. The unconditional surrender he demanded had come. He was ready to heal the process. And I think he would have done it within the 4 years of his second term had he lived to complete those 4 years. So John Wilkes Booth was the worst friend the South ever had.
If it's true that violence can keep a soul from coming to rest, then the way Lincoln died may account for his ghostly presence some have claimed to feel in the White House. Or perhaps it's because he lived to see the end of the war but not the real start of the peace, and his work was left unfinished. Or finally, perhaps the man and the house are haunted because of the very job itself.
Every president's wife who goes into that White House has to feel the spirit of Lincoln brooding over the place, often giving them solace and comfort and protection from the wounds of the office. And those momentous decisions, sometimes made probably in the dark of the night when everybody else was asleep and the president was lying wondering what to do. Maybe the spirit of Lincoln sometimes comes and helps that president to reach the decision that's difficult, but it's right.